So everyone's favourite robot skeleton battle line is looking far more fearsome once again. Let's talk about the Necron Warriors. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Necrons, and today I thought we'd focus on the Necron Warriors, perhaps one of the Necron units that got the single biggest boost out of their points updates. I feel like these are looking really solid once more. I'm sure we'll see them in a lot of top lists. So today I thought we'd do a bit of an overview of the unit, talk through their stats and damage output, a few obvious combos, and how I think about fielding them in game. In Warhammer 40K, the Necron Warriors are of course the lowly automata of the Tomb Worlds, the Necron tier who weren't blessed with some superior body creations, and it basically meant that they were devolved into mindless slaves of their overlords, not really good for anything else. They would march to war in great phalanxes, armed with crackling Gauss weapons, whose green beams dissolve the foe at the molecular level, and are particularly well known for being very hard to kill, resurrecting on death with their reanimation protocols. If you're looking to get your hands on Necron Warriors, I certainly would think about the Recruit starter set from Warhammer 40k. Games Workshop does have a pretty weird offering where they currently offer the Troops box of Necrons for basically the same price as this starter set that includes those same Necrons, plus a Necron Royal Warden and some Space Marines as well. If you're thinking about getting a Necron Warrior kit, I'd certainly spend the exact same price or slightly more to get these guys. It's worth it for the Royal Warden, which you could always use as squad fillers in Immortal squads potentially. Never mind a few Space Marines as well. I suspect that the kit will probably go away in 10th edition, but while it exists, it's perhaps one of the very best deals in Warhammer 40k right now in terms of points that you can get on the table per money spent. Admittedly though, being split between a few factions makes it a little bit less helpful depending on what you collect. The current Necron models though I think are really quite nice. They were redone at the start of 9th edition, so quite a cool plastic kit I think. Fairly simple, with just a weapon and a head swap. You can choose between the Gauss Flare and Gauss Reaper. The heads there are maybe a bit more damaged or a bit more intact, plus the kit comes with some Scarab Swarms as well, which is quite nice to get a small fast attack unit in a Troops box. If you were looking to pick up some of these guys and you're in the UK, Element Games has them at a discount. I'll leave the link to them down in the video description. They have them for 15% off with this box set, just under £28 rather than just over £32. If you use the link to buy any models, then it does help out the channel and keep these videos coming at no extra cost to yourself. Let's talk rules though. First up, Necron Warriors are a troops choice where you get 10 to 20 models in the squad. They're 11 points per model now, they move 6 inches and hit on 3s, a strength and toughness 4, just the 1 attack in combat and 1 wound, leadership 10 and a 4+ save. The weapons they're armed with are either a Gauss Flare or a Gauss Reaper. The Gauss Flare is rapid fire 1, strength 4, AP -1 and damage 1, that's 24-inch range, and the Gauss Reaper is closer range at just the 12 inches but assault 2, strength 5, AP -2 and damage 1. Basically the idea is that the Reaper is significantly more dangerous, but the Flare means that you can get the extra shot out to 24 inches. I prefer the Reaper of the two, as we'll get into in a second. Otherwise though, they have reanimation protocols, which is pretty effective on them seeing as they're a 1 wound unit. You get to stand them back up on 5s once they die, provided you don't lose the whole squad, and Necron Warriors have a boosted version of that, re-rolling rolls of 1. It means that for any reanimation-based synergies, the Necron Warriors are perhaps the best choice for the targets of things like Resurrection Orbs or Canoptek Reanimators. They get command protocols as well, plenty of useful stuff there, and in terms of keywords they have the core keyword, they can take a whole load of buffs, and again as we'll get onto. Overall at this cost I think they're a pretty solid troops choice, a bit of close range anti-infantry damage, though perhaps the best thing about them is that they're just really quite tough with the reanimation protocols. A lot more of a pain to slog through as it looks like from their raw stat line, never mind if you start giving them buffs with other characters and things. As for their recent update, I do think the Necron Warriors have got a whole lot better recently. The main reason of course is because they've got a points cut. They were 13 points before and now went down to 11. I'd say they were usable enough at 13 points. A few competitive lists ran them, though a fair few tended to go for more things like destroyers and wraiths and things. Dropping them down to 11 though really means that you can spam them for a lot less cost. It's a 16% points cut, so you're getting that much more damage and defense of the models on the board, really quite significant. I feel like with the recent Necron changes, troops might just be a little bit more relevant, even though you don't necessarily have to field them in the Arcs of Omen detachments now. With the change to the Necron army, which means that you can't combine Eternal Conquerors with Relentlessly Expansionists anymore, that probably means that there's going to be a few less Necron armies that are running around with whole army objectives secured. I feel like a bunch of people will probably just switch to Nihilak, another objective secured army with some different buffs, but it might encourage some people to pick up things like Novok or Mephrit again for a bit of extra combat or shooting damage. I feel like for those kind of lists in particular, Necron Warriors and troops in general are going to be more important, as if you're not getting objectives secured across the entire army, it makes sense to include some of it in a very durable and annoying troops choice. In any case, at 11 points per model, I feel like they're at the point where they're probably just reaching justification just for their own damage and defense, never mind objective work. Just for a little bit of a damage output comparison between the two guns, at 12-inch range the Gauss Flayers do this and the Gauss Reapers do this. Obviously at close range it isn't going to be a victory for the Flayers. We're comparing 2 strength 5 AP -2 shots versus 2 strength 4 AP -1 ones, but it is interesting to see how big the gap is. Against Guardsmen it's kind of close, 15 for the Flayers but 18 for the shorter range Reapers. But then against most other targets getting heavier than that, it's just not really all that close with the AP and strength coming into bat. The Gauss Reapers kill around about double the amount of Space Marines or Space Marine Terminators, a little bit closer against things like Toughness 7 vehicles where the strength doesn't matter at 6 wounds versus 4.5, but they'll do nicely better against Toughness 8 or 9 with 6 wounds from a big squad of Gauss Reapers versus only 2 from the Gauss Flayers. Obviously the main advantage of the Gauss Flayers is that you get that extra shot out to 24-inch range if you can't get in range of 12 inches, and that is kinda handy. I feel like they maybe have gained a little bit back on the Reapers again after the Armour of Contempt went away. That just made the Gauss Flayers into particularly bad choices against a whole bunch of armies, at least that's no longer the case now. Overall I'd say that they're both usable, but I would say that the Reapers are decently ahead in my book. The change in the damage output is just so big that it's well worth having them, I think. You can still advance and shoot them, which should mean that they could have an effective longer threat range than you might expect. Plus there's a couple of fairly easy ways to deliver the Gauss Reapers into reaping range. You could have them jump about with the Veil of Darkness or out of a transport. Moving on, let's just talk about a few of the ways that we can get a bit more out of the Necron Warriors. There are a fair few. Command protocols are generally something that's going to be happening for the whole army. Plenty of things that the warriors can get out of that depending on the turn. Light cover certainly won't hurt, shooting and doing an action won't hurt either, can be handy for midfield objectives. Vengeful Stars can help their shooting out in a couple of different ways, and Undying Legions can help out with their reanimation, rolling an extra dice per time that you test. I feel like Necron Warriors might be perhaps one of the single best units to stack character buffs though in the entire Necron army. They've got quite an impressive amount of fairly usable options in my opinion. You can't really afford to go for all of these as you still want to balance characters between having enough bodies on the line and more heavy hitting damage dealers. Going through the character support options, I feel like the Veil of Darkness is one of the best choices. Teleport the unit and the bearer somewhere else on the battlefield. A big squad of Gauss Reaper warriors has been one of the best choices for that for quite a while now, I think. Really quite a big damage punch to put those big 40 strength 5 AP -2 shots in perfect range of one enemy unit. Then otherwise there's Overlords for a +1 to hits plus Relentless March. More damage and more movement's always good. The Lord can give you some rerolls as well as Relentless March as well. I'd probably go for the Overlord over him though first. A Resurrection Orb on either of those is perhaps the best target for things like Warriors, particularly if the enemy manages to kill the majority of a 20 model unit and then you trigger the Orb to bring a bunch of them back. Potentially even the Orb of Eternity for 4+ reanimations, really quite reliable when combined with the reroll ones to reanimate. Cryptechs like the Technomancer and Chronomancer are both useful. The Technomancer can respawn D3 warriors a turn, giving you more reanimation shenanigans, and the Chronomancer is just very nice for not getting them killed in the first place. A 5+ invul save is very nice on the squad, as it's got kind of a low save anyway. If you're jumping around the table with the Veil of Darkness as well, then even the second part of the buff could be kind of handy for re-rolling charges if you did want to do a disruptive charge on some light infantry or something. Out of the Cryptech Arcana as well, you could also think about the Hypermaterial Ablator. That one gives you a unit with light cover. Particularly warriors that are saving on a 3+ versus most things, and a 5+ invul save are a lot more tanky to remove. If you're going very heavy on the warriors, you could think about the Royal Warden with his fall back and shoot shenanigans. I feel like he is perhaps a bit more of a luxury choice though, and I probably wouldn't want to pick up one unless you were running multiple big squads of warriors rather than just one. Finally, the Silent King might have lost core, but is still a pretty awesome buffing and damage dealing centerpiece. He can give warrior shooting 4 rerolls to hit, and that can combine really well with particularly one of their stratagems for disintegration capacitors. I think out of all of that character stuff, probably my favourite picks would be, say, an Overlord, the Veil of Darkness, and a Chronomancer. Maybe the Orb of Eternity if you can find somewhere else to put it. Otherwise, outside of character choices, you could also think about putting them inside a Ghost Arc. They're only 115 points, having dropped a fair bit now, and again they've got a bit better with all their Gauss Flayers not having to contend with Armour of Contempt, so are a bit more dangerous against the field. I feel like units of warriors with Gauss Reapers loaded up in a Ghost Art to get them where they need to be swiftly is really quite a nice combo, plus the art can even heal a few of them each turn as well, and make them double down on being an annoying unit to remove from the objective they've just got to. Otherwise, I feel like a Canoptic Reanimator isn't actually the worst choice. They're the ones that can provide you a 4+ reanimation protocol with their beams. The only issue is that they're ridiculously fragile and easy to take out, so if they're in direct line of sight, they're probably just going to get shot, meaning that you might need to do things like hide it behind terrain and then chain warriors back to it so you can keep in the reanimation buff, which still can be effective, particularly if you've got things like Resurrection Orbs on the go. You could think about Strategic Reserve as well. I'm not sure it would be my favourite way to get them in range, but I guess a block of warriors turning up with the Gauss Reapers on the flanks could be another way to get them shooting, plus having an annoying Auspex unit to deal with. Stratagems wise, the warriors have a fair few usable ones, though I feel like most of these aren't auto use every turn sort of things. Solar Pulse can give you ignores cover, could be handy enough if your opponent's got something with a really high save in light cover perhaps. Disruption Fields could give you a +1 strength in melee, that could be okay in Novok where you've got some AP as well. And Relentless Onslaught gives you exploding sixes to hit with rapid fire weapons, that's a direct increase to the gas flares if you're using them. Out of any of these though, I think perhaps my favourite one for high value on a big block of warriors will be the Disintegration Capacitors. That's the one for sixes to hit auto wound the enemy. It's really quite nice in a big block if you're going to be firing against something tough like an Imperial Knight or something. Say if you were blazing away with a full squad of Gauss Reapers, you'd usually be expecting something like 6 wounds to a toughness 8 vehicle with that squad. If you use this, then it goes up to more like 9 or 10, which is quite a big improvement, and it's even better if you had Sarek's Silent King rerolls at the same time. That means that you could just reroll everything and fish for those 6s. I think that's to have you going up to more like 11 or 12 wounds, really quite fearsome. As for the Necron Dynasties, I feel like a few help them out maybe a bit more than others. Novok's obviously better on more melee-orientated things, but warriors can actually be surprisingly punchy with their stratagem. You get 1 CP for +1 to the attack, and they also get extra AP in combat and +1 to advance and charge. 2 attacks at AP -1 definitely isn't nothing when you could be doing it with 20 odd models. You could even use Disintegration Capacitors if you really wanted to take that to the max and take it to strength 5. Mephrit's quite nice for the Gauss Reapers, giving you an extra 3-inch range, plus extra AP in half range, which actually helps out the Flayers a bit too. I feel like Flayers versus Reapers are a lot more balanced in Mephrit, to be honest. They've also got a Mortal Wound stratagem, where on a big warrior block you're probably going to get the full 3 Mortal Wounds for 1 command point. Can be nice for a bit more of a sting in the tail. Nalag, again, I think is going to be pretty popular for the army-wide objective secured, now that the Relentlessly Expansionist and Eternal Conquerors got broken. I feel like warriors are maybe just a little bit less first and foremost there, but they do get a bit tougher in their own deployment zone, and I've got a stratagem to shoot while doing actions as well, which certainly doesn't hurt warriors at all. Otherwise, I perhaps feel that the gains are a bit more marginal. I guess Sotek is one of the dynasties that only really affects warriors and very little else. They can get you 18-inch rapid fire with the Gauss Flayers, though I'm still not sure that's particularly good compared with Mephrit if you want shooting Necrons. Overall, for a rough game plan for fielding the Necron Warriors, I feel like there's a fair few ways that you could field them, but personally I'd take Gauss Reapers and either think about either 10 or 20 strong blocks, probably the 10 strong ones in Ghost Arcs, or 20 strong blocks with supportive characters, like as mentioned the Overlord, Chronomancer, Veil of Darkness as perhaps my first picks, though there's a lot of stuff that you certainly could use well. I feel like there are a unit that you could take multiple big copies of if you wanted to. You probably don't want to take too much away from the heavy damage dealing units in the list, but 2 or 3 big meaty 20 strong units is going to be really annoying for the opponent to deal with, and should guarantee you a turn or 2 of securing objectives pretty safely. When deploying, if they're foot slogging, I think I generally want to be at least moderately aggressive and fairly central to the table. They've only got some quite short range, and they're one of the units that can take a beating better than most units, and it makes them quite a good thing to hold the centre of the board and maybe push up towards midfield objectives alongside your damage dealers. They're perhaps good for being a bit of a counter-attack unit when the opponent goes charging off towards you and maybe takes out some of your other more dangerous stuff, as volley of Gauss Reaper fire could really surprise them, particularly with disintegration capacitors. If you're using the Reapers, then you could get a bit more mobility out of them by advancing each turn. I guess it's just weighing up that versus firing accurately when you do get close. Necron Warriors are a unit that you can use reanimation protocols on really well. They're likely to be reanimating a bunch of models within the turn, so you might be able to snake them out to objectives, or potentially block enemy movement to something more important. You could also reanimate them into light cover or something, and then when the enemy shoots them, you'll be able to tank some saves onto a better saving throw. Having a Veil of Darkness around is quite nice. It means that you could drop them back if they were locked up, and then just re-deep strike them again without actually having counters fall them back, so they'd still get to shoot, or just deliver them as a bit of an alpha strike to a different part of the board, potentially following up with a charge to go up a home field objective for the foe. As for weaknesses, despite their good points, I'd still say they probably aren't the most big reliable damage dealers of the list. Perhaps good for chipping away a bunch of wounds at the enemy units and winning a bit of a war attrition, but probably not going to go just demolishing things in the same way that some destroyers might. They generally don't like melee very much, as they'll have far less damage output, though they certainly can surprise some elite armies who might kill surprisingly little Necrons and then actually take some casualties due to mass strength 4 attacks in return. They are at least somewhat slow and short range though advancing and relentless march can help with that. Of course, Necron Warriors are only one of 2 troops choices. In comparison with Immortals, I would currently rank the Necron Warriors as slightly superior right now, though I think there is a bit of give and take, and the Immortals are slightly more suited to other roles. Durability wise, the Warriors are pretty much just better in my opinion, at 11 points rather than 13. Even if the units get shot by fairly ideal weapons for the Immortals, either Strength 4 or Strength 5, it still only shakes out to be about roughly even due to the Warriors costing less and having better reanimation. The Warriors tend to be decently ahead against most other profiles, particularly things that don't differentiate amazingly well between Necron Warriors and Immortals, things with like really high strength and AP. On the damage front, it is a massive win for the Warriors as well if they can get their Gauss Reapers in range. They're basically 45% more efficient than the Gauss Blasters, just due to being basically the same profile but costing less. Though the Immortals will have better firepower at longer range, maybe making them a little bit better for camping home field objectives if that's what you want to do with a small squad of them. I feel like that perhaps is the best role for them. You don't have to invest quite as many points in them as the Warrior squads, and that can be a bit more efficient for using a minimum sized unit, and they're not too bad in light cover as well with their 3+ armor. Overall though, I think Warriors are my favourite of the 2. They get better reanimation protocols with rerolling those ones, bigger blocks for bigger durability buffs, the ability to use the Ghost Arc, and overall probably better damage and durability, even if you might need to use something like a Veil of Darkness or a Ghost Arc or something to get that damage and range. Overall, I'd say that the Necron Warriors are very solidly improved out of this update. I expect a few big blocks to be hitting the table in a bunch of Necron lists going forward. I'll be interested to hear your guys' takes and to whether or not you think that they might be making a bit of a comeback. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'm sure we'll have more Necron videos coming out, and if you'd like to see a bit of a focused Necron take on the Arcs of Omen update, then I'll leave the link to that video down in the video description. We go through the points changes, secondaries, and a few other bits and bobs. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos on the channel quite a bit, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description below if you're interested in supporting. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.